everyone, my name is Megan and today I have a video for you where I'm going to talk about the history of my reading. And I think I'm going to break this up into multiple videos because I think how we got to become readers is a very interesting discussion, and I think for this first video I'm just going to talk about what I read in elementary school and kind of how that affected me. And for me, elementary school is from kindergarten to 6th grade. So I honestly don't remember anything I read before 3rd grade. It was all either read to me or they were just like picture books. I know I read things like Stella Luna. My biggest reading memory prior to 3rd grade is in 1st grade. I was placed in a reading group. We were broken up into groups by our teacher to have like group reading sessions, and I was placed in a group with a boy with ADD, a girl who had just immigrated from Vietnam and didn't speak a word of English, and a boy who couldn't read at all. And I know my reading level was higher than that, but my teacher, I had a lot of problems with my 1st grade teacher. She's literally, like, anyone who had my 1st grade teacher greatly impacted in a negative way by her. And I do think that a lot of my struggles with reading later on came from that reading experience with her and just being made to feel like an idiot by her. 3rd grade, there are 2 books that really come to mind. The first one is the first novel I ever had to read, and that was Charlotte's Web by, I want to say it's E.W. White. I don't really have many of the books from elementary school because I wasn't really a big reader then. I do kind of remember Charlotte's Web like piquing my interest, but at the same time the first novel I read I'd already seen as a movie before, and I wasn't terribly drawn into the story because like I could just go home and watch Fern and Wilbur experience their stuff, and I could watch Templeton like singing, and I don't really feel a connection to the story with it being my first novel. I have a much greater attachment to a novel I wasn't supposed to read. It was actually the very first present I was ever given. My 2nd grade teacher knew that my family was going through some hard times. My dad was in the hospital, in and out of the hospital that year, and we really didn't have a lot of money because of that, and she actually went and got me Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. My mom had just read to me Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. We really didn't have the money for the second book, and I was kind of upset, and there was a book fair going on in our school, and my 2nd grade teacher was all like, well, you know, don't tell the other students I'm doing this, but she bought me Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I spent like that year just kind of, my mom would read that book to us whenever we were feeling really down because of what was going on in our life, and I think that was kind of like where I started to move into the realm of liking books, because I really liked my 2nd grade teacher, and for her to give me this gift when she knew I was going through a hard time was just amazing. Then we go on to 4th grade. I don't remember all of the books that I read in 4th grade. There were 2 books that the teacher actually read out loud, like we would have after recess to get us to calm down. She would read to us for about 20 minutes. 2 books I remember the most being read. I know she read about 4 or 5, and we had something called Rolling Readers who would come in and read, but I don't really remember. I don't really remember who those authors were. I do remember she read The Witches by Roald Dahl, and I do remember liking that book, but I think the book that she read that resonated much more was Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume, and as a 4th grader, that was like the first actual connection I had to a character, because I do have a younger sister, and I did feel in 4th grade that I was always placed behind my sister's needs, and I deeply, deeply resonated with the character in that book. So I mean, like the first 2 books I remember resonating with were people around my age. Then the 3 other books I remember reading were Stone Fox, Sarah Plain and Tall, and Island of the Blue Dolphins. And what I remember about were Stone Fox, which I remember not liking because of the ending. I'll give you a hint. It's a book I had to read in school about a dog. And then Sarah Plain and Tall, and I would have much rather watched the movie than read the book. And then there was Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is about a girl whose tribe is heading to California from an island, and her brother gets left behind, and she jumps off to save her brother. And it's a very tragic story. Then in 5th grade, there were a few books. 3 of the books that I actually had to read when I was as part of my curriculum. One was Maniac McGee by Jerry Spinelli. Then I read Sign of the Beaver. I don't remember who this is by, and they do actually have a TV series on this one, but I didn't know because it's under a different name, or half released under a different name, half released under Sign of the Beaver. This is about a pioneer family who makes a journey to the north. The father and son go, they build the cabin for their family, for the family that's waiting. Then the father goes back to get the family, and the son is left alone. And it takes much longer for the father to get there, so he integrates with the Native Americans that are there, and it's basically his journey and discovering who he is. And then the other book I read that year as required reading was In the Year of the Boar and Jackie Robinson. This is a book about a Chinese American or a Chinese immigrant and how she assimilates into American culture. Obviously this is in the same year as Jackie Robinson's introduction to baseball. The last book is probably the book that changed my life the most, and that is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. It took me 17 months to read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban because my reading level was so low. I literally had to sit there with a dictionary and just read words and try and figure out what they meant. And I literally had pages of me just defining words I didn't know, because prior to this I had help from my parents with a lot of the reading. I didn't necessarily feel the desire to read. A lot of it came from my experience in first grade and just being made to feel like I was a failure as a reader, and was the book that gave me the incentive to read because it was powerful enough to make me want to keep reading despite the struggles. And in the process of reading this book in 5th grade, I went from a 3rd grade reading level to an 11th grade reading level. And this brings me to my 6th grade reading, which is the last set of my elementary reading. A lot of what I read in 6th grade was optional. It wasn't optional reading, but I got to choose this or that. So there were a few things that I had to read as a class. One was Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. I do remember liking this book enough that I wanted to go out and get my own copy and reread it. I bought my own copy and I've actually went out and read it. And the second one was Bridge to Terabithia. So it was either like optional reads or book reports for the most part. And some of the books I read were King Arthur, His Knights and Their Ladies, which is a compressed version of the Tale of King Arthur. Then the 2 other books I remember reading were No More Dead Dogs by Gordon Korman. This was one of the first books I read after I'd read his Island trilogy. This is a book about a boy who protests the fact that the dog always dies. And then the final book I read was Tuck Everlasting, and I remember being really excited for this book, not because of the fact that we were reading the book, but because my first ever crush ended up in my group, and not my friends' groups, because me and my 2 best friends in 6th grade all had a crush on the same guy, and we all ended up in different reading groups, and he ended up in my group, and it was, you know, a little like novel moment. But then unlike novels, we all made a pact that none of us would ask him out because we were all friends and didn't want to, you know, throw any wrenches into our friendship. So, you know, that's called an anticlimax right there. But I just remember having a lot of fun working on this because, you know, I was literally sitting like a foot from my crush for like the 2 weeks I had to read this book. That's my elementary school reading experience. I will probably come back in like a couple weeks with my middle school, high school, and then college reading experience. I might even do one about my booktube reading experience. I don't know about that yet. Thanks for watching this video, and for now, if you want to watch more of my content, you can go ahead and, you know, click this side right here. And thanks for watching. Until next time. Talk to you later.